Good evening, Dr. Reddy.
Hello, good evening, Dr. Weber.
So after a long gap,
Yeah,
most of the students have actually completed their exams. It must be relaxing. So keeping a very what do you say, a short sort of a topic.
yeah. A lot of radio biology to be discussed, though.
Uh, yeah, I've not put in a lot of radiobiology in this. We will actually have a detailed discussion because even because if you look at it, something around 5.2 and 5.4 grades, so radiobiology actually models don't work.
Dr. Weber, your voice is something wrong with your voice.
Am I audible now?
Yeah. Now it's perfectly fine.
We'll wait for 1 or 2 minutes and then we'll
Yeah,
start.
yeah. I think we should wait. We should wait for like 5 minutes, then we can start.
Hmm. Good evening, Litan sir. I just saw you that you joined, and actually, Dr. Riddhi also pointed out. So we would love your comments and your views about this trial, and we'd like to learn from you, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you, Vivai. Thank you.
Dr. Reddy, I think we can start. I'm not expecting many because, like I said, the exams are over and we won't be getting a lot of participants. Without wasting time.
Okay, Dr. Viva, we can start.
I had actually messaged Tanveer sir also. He said he'd be joining in. He's not joined in as yet. So as and when he joins. Okay, so I'll just start. Okay, so good evening. After quite a long gap, I think most of the students have completed, in fact, all of them have completed their exams. I hope the results are all positive, and we would like to actually hear how the experience was. This would be useful for the students who would be going for the exams later this year or next year probably. So welcome back again. We'll be having these sessions regularly now. Like Dr. Riddhi had pointed out last time, we'd be having more contouring sessions. And in interspersed, now we've got Dr. Sayan just posted that he'll be having a lot of physics sessions. It will be taken by both radiation oncologists and the physicists. So that'll be something very exciting to actually look forward to. And we'll also add a lot of radiobiology. So for today, we've just kept a short topic. JCs, it's not done in most of the centers. Now, the journal clubs are very important. We get a lot of updates regarding our day-to-day practice, and some of the trials are landmark. Some studies actually define your way ahead, the treatment approach, and some papers have to be taken with a pinch of salt. So this is one paper which is quite interesting. Now, this is the fast forward trial which was published in April 2020. So this would be our topic for the journal club today. So we will discuss about the intricacies related to this trial, and is it really the way forward? Do we need to implement the same as we go along? So to start with, this is the paper. This was by the Adrian Murray Brand group from the UK. John Yarnell, he's a prominent name in radiobiology, and also in the previous studies that happened in terms of the hyperfractionation. So this is the hyperfractionated breast radiotherapy, where they've looked into 1 week versus 3 weeks, the standard 3 weeks that is being practiced. So they looked into the 5-year efficacy and the late normal tissue effect results. This was a multicentric trial which looked into the non-inferiority. It's a randomized phase 3 trial. The article was published in April 2020. Like I said, it was published in the Lancet Oncology. The journal has an impact factor of 35. So now coming to a background of the study. Now, whenever as a student, whenever I was asked what is the rationale behind practicing hypofractionation. So the first side that you actually talk is the breast, and the second one is the prostate. So, and what is the reason? So we actually tend to actually say that it is the alpha by beta ratio and the radiobiology behind it. So is it really just the radiobiology? So when you look at the START studies as well as the Canadian studies, and now you've got the fast forward, the import high, the import low. So it is not just the alpha by beta ratio or the radiobiology that is associated. You've got a lot of other factors also. In fact, when we talk about hypofractionation, as your dose per fraction increases, most of your radiobiological models actually don't comply, and there are a few limitations associated with these models. Now you've got your universal model, which defines your SBRT and SRS, and just not your the other five models that we read from our radiobiology textbooks. So what else triggered the need for coming down from the conventional 5-week treatment to something like 3 week and now with 1 week? So if you look at the studies that are coming, the regions that these studies are coming are from the UK and Canada. So these two countries actually have got the state-sponsored medicine, and that means that the patients don't have pay from their pocket. If they are a citizen of the UK or Canada, the state takes care of all the treatment-related expenses and the charges that are incurred. So when UK started with the pilot start project, prior to that, when they looked into the compliance, when they moved from mastectomy to BCS, they found out that even when the patients had a good compliance with the BCS, they were going ahead with the treatment. But thereafter, when the patients needed to come for radiation, there was a lot of discrepancy in that regard. So there were just around 35 to 40% who were actually complying and going ahead with the radiation therapy that was needed. So the solution that they came up with was the reason that was found out was that the females, most of them were working, and having a 5 week gap after radiation, or sorry, after surgery, for in some cases 5 weeks and in some cases 7 weeks when you look into the boost. So that was too much for them, because it resulted in them losing their jobs and um, having a stoppage in their flow of income. So that was the reason that the pilot study came into picture, and they looked into 3 weeks. So after that, once the 3 week came, then they found out that still there were around 15 to 20% who were still not complying, and they needed further reduction. And that is where your FAST and the fast forward trial came into picture. So it is just not the radiobiology, but also the logistics. But if you come into the introduction of the study, now you had the EBCTCG group, which looked into the role of surgery and in terms of your breast conservation as well as your mastectomy, and they found out that the effect of radiotherapy after both mastectomy as well as your breast conservative surgery, it translated into good locoregional control as well as reduction in the breast cancer related deaths. So these were the systematic reviews that took place. And thereafter, when we had the start trial results that came into, as well as the Canadian trial pictures that came into, it found out that the hypofractionation was safe and effective. So across the world, if you see, UK and the international standard right now is giving 40 gray in 15 fractions, and it has become a standard of care in case of breast, in both mastectomy as well as your breast conservative surgeries. We are still awaiting the FAST trial results. The FAST trial was actually the basis for the study. This is the fast forward study that was there. So like Dr. Reddy pointed out, we'll be talking a little bit about radiobiology. I would not be going into depths because, like I said, we are going ahead with very high fractionated dose, where your basic radiobiological models actually fail, and they don't actually come into picture. So just the basics of it, when you look into the kinetics of radiation-induced cell death, the factors that are involved include your single-strand break, the double-strand break, the linear and the quadratic cell kill. So here you can see the damage that is being caused, and this leads to your the cell survival curve. So basically, the two parameters that are assessed include your alpha and the beta. So alpha is basically your log of number of cells sterilized non-repairably per gray of ionizing radiation. And the beta is the log of number of cells sterilized in a repairable way per gray squared. So here you've got the linear as well as the quadratic model that comes into, and you get your cell survival curve in terms of the dose and the effect that is being produced. So then comes then the picture that came into was the alpha by beta ratio. So mathematically, when you look into the cell kill, so alpha D is equal to the beta D square, and thereafter you calculate, and it is found that it's the ratio of the intrinsic radiosensitivity to repair capability of the specified tissue. So when these models were studied, so they found out that if you've got a high radiation dose that is more than 8 gray, so it was the ratio was high for rapidly proliferating tissues and most tumors, especially your head and neck squamous cell carcinomas, the mucosa that is associated. And it was small for slowly proliferating tissues, including the late normal tissues and the tumors like the CA prostate and the CA breast. So this was the low alpha by beta ratio, which prompted us to look into the hyperfractionation part. The study of hypofractionation itself is quite interesting. So, like I said, Dr. Yarnold, who is one of the pioneers in modern day radiobiology and the trials that have taken place in terms of the hypofractionation in breast. So, this is a very old paper which came in, which was published in 1983. This looked into the role of isoeffective curves for the change in dose per fraction. So you had two models which were these are theoretical models which interpolated your 2 gray per fraction and looked into your alpha by beta ratio, and they found out that the ratio of the effective doses and your dose per fraction, when you interpolate from your 2 gray per fraction, it changes. And when this was studied in the animal models, especially in the murine models and in the different tissues, and they found out that the percentage change in the total dose in regard to the ratio of the isoeffective doses did have a significant difference when you look into the various tissues of the organs. So when this paper was by Withers, and when John Yarnold looked into the ISO effect curves, they found out that most of the studies that were done right from your 1952 to the 1980s, they combined all the studies, and they found out that the majority of the studies were in the hyperfractionation arm. That is, the dose that was delivered was less than 2 gray per fraction. And you had a few studies which looked into higher dose per fraction, that is around 5 gray per fraction. And this is the dose effect for the control of inoperable or the recurrent breast cancer. This table has been adapted from the paper by Cohen. So here the vertical axis is the total dose expressed in Rongens, and the vertical position here, it indicates the tumor, the median tumor dose that is being prescribed. And when you look into the horizontal axis, it defines the number of daily fractions given 5 times per week. And the large circles here, they represent the published series of minimum 30 patients. Open large circles that you have here, they describe the control in which more than 50% of the tumor control was achieved, and the closed large circles is less than 50% of the tumor control. So here you can see you had both hyperfractionated as well as the hypofractionated arms, and the results were quite interesting. So even here, if you see the 3-week barrier is being achieved, and you getting more than 50% of the tumor control. And this was especially for the inoperable or your recurrent cancers. So when Dr. Yarnold interpolated this, at that time, they were not looking into the alpha by beta ratio, but they were looking into the beta by alpha ratio. And one of the line if you read into this paper by Cohen, it was said that the beta by alpha ratio was around 2.68. And when he converted into the alpha by beta, and they found out that it was quite low, and this actually excited Dr. Yarnold, and he interpolated the same and looked into the hypofractionation part for the breast cancers. So why is the interest in hypofractionation? So now we've discussed what the radiobiology is. You've got the assumption of better tumor control. You've got additional mechanisms of radiation-induced damages, which include your vascular, the immunological, and the apoptotic pathways that are involved, as well as the logistics. You've got technological advancements which lead to less adverse effects, and also the economic favorability. So what exactly is the logistics that we're talking about? So there was a pattern of care studies that was done, and it showed that although more patients are being treated with with BCS, the use of radiotherapy was low. Like I said, in UK, when the survey was done, they found out that the compliance was just 35 to 40%. So the likelihood of receiving radiotherapy, it was related to the insurance, the race, the income, as well as the distance from radiotherapy centers. So to help alleviate the strain on patient and the institutional resources, and to also have early completion of treatment, hyperfractionation was looked into. So this was a very interesting study that was done by Platiniotis, and they looked into simple maths. So if you look at the use of 16 fractions instead of 25 fractions regime, it would save around 900 treatment sessions per 100 patients. So like if you've got 100 patients who would be undergoing 2500 sessions for the 25 for the 50 grain 25 fractions, and if you subtract it from your 16 fraction treatment with 42.6 gray, so you're actually saving around 900 treatment sessions. So that means if you interpolate these 900 divided by 16 fractions, you can additionally treat around 56 patients who would be treated with the same number of fractions. And this would result in substantial economic benefit, as breast cancer patients represent the majority of patients treated in the RT departments, especially in the West. So then this formed the basis, and this is the timeline. If you look into the UK studies, you had your the pilot start that came into picture in 1986. Then you had your start A and B. Then you had your fast. We are awaiting the results for fast. In between, you had the boost trials, that is the import low and the import high, which looked into the sequential boost, and the fast forward trial, which was started, which completed its recruitment in 2012, and now we have the results in 2020. So this is the timeline if you just look into the UK part. So what exactly was START? Now you had the pilot study which started in 1986. Then you had your START A and the START B. So the important thing to understand is that START A and START B, they were simultaneously started. START A started in 1998, but within a year even START B was started, and the accrual was undertaken. You had almost similar patients in your START A and START B. The difference comes into your the arms that were defined. So START A, it had 3 arms, which looked into your conventional 50 grain 25 fractions versus your 41.6 in 13 and your 39 in 13, versus just 2 arms, that is 15 25 and 14 15. One important aspect, if you look into the paper of START A, which is very important, is that START B was what we present today. They look into your 5-day per week treatment, but START A, it had an alternate day treatment, and that is how it went into just around 5 weeks. So the mean age, it was around 57.2 years for START A and 57.4 in START B. And the nodal positivity was around 25%. And if you look into both START A and START B, the majority of the patients were more than or equal to T2 size. And boost was received in 60% in START A and around 42% in START B. Chemotherapy was being delivered, and around 35% patients received it in START A and around for 22% in START B. So if you look into the results, now START A and START B, the 5-year local relapse and your 10-year local relapse, it's almost the same if you look into the 3 arms in START A, and if you look into the 2 arms of START B, it did not have a major difference, and that is where your the hyperfractionation actually came into picture, since it was not inferior. The main concern in the minds of the radiation oncologists who were treating, as well as the fraternity looking into the breast disease management group, was related to the toxicities that are associated. So the breast shrinkage was calculated in both your START A and START B, and it was found that it was though it was not statistically significant, but it was much lower when you look into your 40 gray in 15 fractions arm. When you look into the START A, the 39 and 13, it definitely had a little worse outcomes if you compare. And yeah, so it had a worse arm. So that is why the arm was removed from the START B part. And your Ontario studies, they looked into the breast cosmesis at 10 years, and they found out it was almost the same for both 50 gray in 25 and 42.5 in 16 fractions. So now coming to the fast forward trial. So this was a multicentric study. It was a non-blinded phase 3 randomized non-inferiority trial. It had a sub-study group which looked into the photographic assessment of your late adverse effects. However, this was not done at all centers because it required photographic assessment. And when, as we go along, I'll point out how many patients were actually recruited, and this became a limitation for understanding the photographic assessment. There was a safety analysis that was assessed, which looked into the radiotherapy to the axilla or the SCF, which was quite unique because this was not done in the previous trials that were there. So all women and men who are more than or equal to 18 years with invasive breast carcinoma were included in the studies who belong to the stage of T1 to T3 with the pathological N0 to N1 and a non-metastatic stage. The patients who underwent BCS or MRM were included. The patients who were excluded included the low risk patients, which included patients who are more than or equal to 65 years, pathologically T1, grade 1 or 2, ERPR positive and HER negative, and those who are PN0 or M0. The important point to understand is that the low risk patients that we define here, if you interpolate this, these patients are of excellent indication for APBI. So one of the concerns that was there when Fast Forward actually was started was that the investigators might just include patients who are very much suitable for APBI. But very interestingly and very smartly, the design that was done for Fast Forward, they excluded these patients so that in future there was no controversy in regards to the same. So one thing that we actually learned from the study is that the APBI indications, those whoever were suitable were not included for the study. Patients underwent axillary surgery. Endocrine therapy was allowed. Even those patients who received trastuzumab were included. One of the exclusion criteria was that the patient should not have received, should not be receiving any concurrent chemotherapy. Patients who underwent BCS, they participated in the photographic assessment and a written informed consent was taken. So coming to the study design, the randomization was done in 40 gray in 15 arm, which was the group A, 27 gray in 5 fractions and 26 gray in 5 fractions in a 1:1:1 randomization. The boost, it was 10 or 16 gray with the 2 gray per fraction, that is 10 gray in 5 fractions or 16 gray in 8 fractions. It was left to the institute or the centers, and it was as per their own discretions. So the block size of 6 and 9, it was decided and stratified by the RT center as well as the risk group. And looking into the prior studies at your start and the fast, the alpha by beta was fixed at 3. The important aspect that we need to understand, since it's more or less a very high hyperfractionated dose, so the radiation therapy details were quite interesting, and we need to actually have a look into that. So the whole breast, when it was taken, it was the soft tissue of the whole breast with the 5 mm below the skin surface that was covered, and the PTV included your CTV with a 10 mm margin. And in case of your mastectomies, the chest wall CTV, it included the skin flaps and the soft tissue with a 10 mm margin to the CTV forming the PTV. The boost, it was the CTV of the tumor bed, and a PTV again, it was of around 10 mm margin that was defined. So here you can see the CTV for your tumor bed boost and the margin that has been given. So the CTV and your PTV is being defined here. The PTV DVH was just for the planning purpose that it was being defined. So you, according to the center, who in whatever practice that they were comfortable with, a volume-based or a field-based based planning was done. The volume-based planning, it included the CTV, which was based on the START trial, a whole breast with a 5 mm margin taken away from the skin. The posterior margin, they did not extend into the deep fascia, and your PTV to the whole breast included a 10 mm margin to the CTV. Yeah. So the field-based planning, it included your provisional tangential field pair, that is the whole breast field PTV, 5 mm from the skin surface, and 5 mm edited out from the lung or the chest wall interface, 5 mm from the posterior beam edge or the MLC if it is used on the main beams, and 10 mm from the superior and the inferior beam edges. So this is how it is. The photograph has been taken from the protocol. So here you can see this is quite an ideal tangential field that you can actually see, because the PTV is actually the PTV is just stopping here, and you're not getting the CTV rather. So and it's just being incorporated. So you actually don't get it very ideally in your day-to-day practice. So since this is from the protocol, probably they've given the best photograph that has been available. The chest wall CTV, it encompasses the skin flaps and the soft tissue down to the deep planes, which excluded the underlying muscle and the rib cage. And the PTV constituted a 10 mm margin to the CTV. Um, the center had its own discretion whether they wanted to use the bolus or not. The organs at risk, only two main organs were decided. It was the ipsilateral lung, which was taken as a single structure, and the whole heart. That is the extent of the pericardial sac that needed to be included. This was as per the Crosby study and the paper that we have for the cardiac contouring. The major blood vessels were excluded. The superior extent, it included your pulmonary trunk and the right, where your pulmonary trunk and your right pulmonary artery was seen as separate. So the cardiac contouring was quite vigorous, and even the dose constraints that were given were quite tight. So this is how it is. You can see the arch of aorta. Here it's dividing. You've got your ascending aorta. You've got a descending aorta, and here you can see the pulmonary trunk coming into picture. Here this is the left pulmonary artery, the right pulmonary artery, and where the division of your pulmonary trunk and the appearance of the right pulmonary artery is being seen, that is where your the contouring of the heart or your pericardial sac uh, came into existence. So the dose prescription, like we defined, the control group included 40 gray in 15 fractions over 3 weeks with a 2.67 gray per fraction. The test group 1, it included 27 gray in 5 fractions over 1 week with a 5.4 gray per fraction. And a test group 2, that is 26 gray in 5 fractions over 1 week with 5.2 gray per fraction. Am I audible? Someone just mentioned.
Yeah, audible.
Yeah. So the boost, like I said, it's 16 gray or 10 gray and 2 gray fraction sequential electron or photon boost to the tumor bed, which was allowed in all 3 treatment groups. The decision was declared before randomization of each individual patient, and it was as per the protocol that the institution or the center actually had. So the dose target and constraints, it was quite vigorous, and they followed it very strictly. The whole breast PTV mandatory constraints were V95 being more than or equal to 90%, with your V105 and 107 being less than 7 and 2% respectively. The Dmax needed to be less than or equal to 110%. The optimal plan that was being taken into consideration included your V95 being more than or equal to 95% and your V105 being less than or equal to 5%. The ipsilateral lung, the V30 was being taken into consideration, which the mandatory needed to be less than 17%, and the optimal that was considered was less than 15%. Similarly, for the heart, you had your V25 and your V5 that were less than 5 and 25%. So it's quite easy to remember. It's just the reverse of the number that is being taken into account. So this is the tangential field, the Be My view that you're getting. The tangential fields were taken into consideration. Here you can see the 102% coverage along with your 105 up to right up to your 50% coverage being taken into account. So the assessment, it was done on an annual follow-up visit where your ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence and your late normal tissue effects were being assessed. You had a 4-point scale grading, and according to this grading scale, the grades were defined at all your follow-ups. The main factors that were being considered included your symptomatic rib fractures, the presence of lung fibrosis, as well as your ischemic heart disease. They had a subjective assessment from the patients in the form of questionnaires, which included your EORTC quality of life questionnaire, that is the breast 23, which were filled at baseline and then subsequently at 3, 6, 12, 24, and 60 months respectively. A body image scale was used to look into the various parameters associated with the fibrosis and the other parameters associated. When you look into the photographic study, a baseline, a 2-year and a 5-year photographic assessment was done, and a 3-point scale was taken in this regard, which looked into the changes in the breast size and the shape relative to the contralateral side. The photographs were scored by 3 different observers who were blinded when these patients were coming for the follow-ups. The outcomes included the primary endpoint, like we discussed, it included your ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence and the first regional relapse, especially in the axilla, the SCF, and the IMN were taken as one of the outcomes. The secondary endpoints had included the late normal tissue effects as well as the disease-related and the survival outcomes, especially in terms of the locoregional recurrence, the distant recurrence, the disease-free survival, and your overall survival. So coming to the statistical analysis, now the target sample size was defined at 4,000 patients. This was to exclude an absolute increase of 1.6% in your 5-year IBTR. So the inferiority was defined at 1.6. You remember this was a non-inferiority trial. So anything that was within the bracket of 1.6% was considered to be non-inferior, and the test arm would be considered to be non-inferior to the control arm. The event rates were low, so binary proportions were taken into consideration, and the attrition was fixed at 10% of loss to follow-up. And according to that, the sample size was calculated. The late normal tissue effect was set at 8%, and hence you had 2196 patients that were needed, and 732 patients per group were being incorporated. The Kaplan-Meier estimates for a 95% confidence interval were taken into account, and the hazard ratio was calculated with the help of the Cox proportion models. And your absolute difference in the 5-year ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence estimate was done as per these statistical analysis. You had your fine-gray competing risk regression model that was taken into account, and non-inferiority of each 5 fraction schedule was being compared. Since you're comparing the 2 schedules, the p-value was set at less than 0.0025 because of the alpha spending. The late normal tissue effect assessment, it was done with the help of your 5-year cross-sectional analysis, which compared the prevalence of your moderate or the marked effects versus the none or the mild effects between group risks using the risk ratio as well as the risk differences. And these tests, the test that was applied for assessing this risk ratio and the risk difference was the Fisher exact test, and the longitudinal analysis of moderate or marked effects versus the none or the mild. It was done by the odds ratio or the Wald's test that was there. The change in the photographic breast appearance, it looked into the generalized estimating equations. Since you do not have much of mild changes that were there, so the mild and the marked changes were combined. And since multiple testing were done, the significance level was kept at 0.005. The estimates of fractionation sensitivity, that is the alpha by beta, was like I said, it was defined by the START and the FAST trials. And the Cox proportional hazard regression model over time, it took into account the total dose and the total dose into the fraction size that defined your alpha by beta ratio for the different the parameters that were associated. So the primary alpha by beta was defined at 3, but for the different changes in the breast, like right from your breast shrinkage to breast edema or your presence of telangiectasias, the alpha by beta ratio was calculated for each parameter separately. There were no interim analysis that were done, and all the analysis were in terms of the intention to treat basis. So now, importantly, coming to the results. Now, like we discussed, there were around 4,100 patients that were enrolled and randomly assigned, and it included around 1368 in the control arm, that is the 40 gray and 15 fractions, versus 1370 and 1372 patients in the 27 gray and 26 gray respectively. So in the if you look into the per protocol population, there were around 1354 patients in the control arm, and in test group 1 and test group 2, there were around 1355 and 1347 patients respectively. And when the 5-year visit forms were assessed, there were around 1218 patients in the control arm, and 1231 and 1232 patients in the test 1 and test 2 group. So the recruitment and was started in November 2011, concluded in December 2014. The compliance was quite significant. It was around 99%. And even if you compare your 5-year visit at the end from your the first visit, so the 5-year visit forms were filled by around 96% of the patients. The median follow-up was for 71.5 months. The ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence was seen in 31 patients in your control arm, 27 patients in your test group 1, that is 27 gray in 5 fractions, and 21 patients in your 26 gray in 5 fractions. The hazard ratio, if you compare separately, the 40 gray versus 27 gray, it was 0.86, and it was much lower for your 40 gray versus 26 gray, it was 0.83. When the time to event analysis were done, the ipsilateral breast tumor, the local response, the loco-regional relapse, the distant relapse, and any breast cancer related events, the significance, if you see the estimated absolute difference versus the 40 gray at 5 years, all the differences were less than 1.6%, which was set. So the ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence, the cumulative incidence at 5 years was 2.1% for the 40 gray, 1.7 for the 27 gray, and 26 gray for the 26 gray it was 1.4. So when you look into the difference, it was 0.3 and 0.7% respectively. So the upper confidence interval for the non-superiority was set at 1.6, and here you can see the difference was less. So it was found to be significant. Yeah. Dr. Chandan, I will come back to it. The difference of 1 gray, I'll show it. This was purely your the alpha by beta that was being calculated. So yeah, so this is your the cumulative risk that was being assessed. So the one in maroon, this is 40 gray in 15 fractions, where you're looking into your IBTR in percentage versus your time since randomization. So around the 3-year mark, the curves actually separate out, and here you can see at 7 years, 26 gray in 5 fractions, the IBTR is significantly low as compared to your 40 gray and your 27 gray. So when they looked into the relapses, the second primary and the deaths, the regional relapse was seen in 34 patients, that is 1% in the 40 gray, 0.8 and 0.7 in the 27 gray, and the 26 gray arm. There was no statistical significant difference in the local regional relapse, the distant relapse, the disease-free survival, as well as the overall survival. Contralateral malignancies were seen in 55 patients, which were evenly distributed, 18, 17, and 20 patients in all the 3 arms. The non-breast second primary was seen in 123 patients. The most common second primary that were developed was your colorectal malignancies. Total 287 patients died. That is 151 were due to the breast cancer, 125 due to other causes, and 11 had unknown diseases. When the toxicities were assessed, they were by the modified RTOG scale or the CTCAE version, and it was as per the institutional protocol to report the same. So the toxicity that was seen were around 9.9% for the 40 gray, 15.4 with the 27 gray, and 26 gray it was around 11.9%. There was a statistical difference that was seen with the 40 gray and the 26 gray arm, which was the p-value was quite significant. It was 0.0003. And the most prevalent effect was the breast shrinkage. Higher risk for moderate or the marked effect in the breast or the chest wall, the breast distortion, the shrinkage, the induration, and the edema was seen with 27 gray arm. So again, when you look into your 5-year cumulative moderate to marked normal tissue effects for the 40 gray arm versus the 27 and the 26 gray, it was quite similar. In fact, it was a little higher for the 27 gray arm with around 35.1%, but almost similar for the 40 gray and the 26 gray arm. The patient reported outcomes, the photographic study that was done was only in the 1774 patients, and the highest 5-year prevalence was seen in terms of the change in the breast appearance, which was again almost similar, was better in your 26 gray in 5 fraction arm. Again, so when we look into the protocol specific items, especially your breast appearance, the breast becoming smaller, breast becoming harder or firmer, or the skin appearance being changed. So all across, if you see, the difference was seen in your breast appearance, and it favored your 26 gray arm. Also, the breast becoming smaller was found to be statistically significant. But in terms of the other parameters, if you look into the breast pain, the breast being swollen, breast being oversensitive, any skin problems associated, or any arm or shoulder pain, it was none of the parameters were found to be significant. Similarly, for the arm or the hand being swollen or difficulty in raising arm, it was the same for all the three studies. So when we are talking about the photographic study, there were 1,700 patients who consented, but at 5 years, you just had 1,300 reports available. The authors have been very modest in actually accepting the mistake that there was a clerical error and appointments were not made, and hence there was a very high attrition associated with the photographic sub-study. So if you look into the 27 gray arm, it increased the risk of mild or marked change in the breast appearance compared to the 40 gray, which was there was no difference that was seen with the 26 gray arm. So now coming to the discussion of the study, now the non-inferiority, as we said, it was fixed at 1.6%, and it was found to be within the 1.6% margin. And so especially for the ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence at 5 years follow-up. The normal tissue events at 5 years, it was similar for the 26 gray arm versus the 40 gray arm. Like I said, it was not statistically significant, but if you look in the head-on comparison, the 27 gray arm did have a little higher event rate versus the 26 gray arm when you compared it with the 40 gray. Now we've got improved diagnostic treatment modalities, as well as the patients were committed for completing the treatment. So if you compare it with the START A, the START B, which were which did not have these luxuries of improved diagnostic and the treatment modalities, as well as the awareness among the patient population. So that is why Fast Forward looks comprehensively into a very good subset of patients, and the results need to be accepted. So when the hazard ratio of the clinical breast shrinkage for the 40 versus the 50 gray arm were being considered in the previous studies, it would the hazard ratio at 5 years was 0.83 and at 10 years was 0.8. And the results were applicable to the different the different prognostic groups. We got the meta-analysis of the START trials, and it has shown that you can apply the same across the various prognostic subgroups, because this was one of the criticisms that actually occurred, because you define your sample size, and then the subsets or the subgroups that are being analyzed, they actually don't take into account the patient population. So this was one of the what do you say, the limitations that were associated with the previous studies. Also, in this study, they've not defined the subset uh, uh, analysis of the various subgroups or the characteristics of the patients. Since it was not defined, it can be called as a minor limitation associated with the study. So the alpha web beta for the Fast Forward, it was found to be 3.7 gray. When you compare it for the START, it was 3.5, and for the FAST, it was 2.6 gray. So this 5-fraction regimen, it can be considered as a type of your partial breast irradiation. It's quite convenient and less expensive and safe for regional radiation therapy as well. We are awaiting the sub-study that has been done with the Fast Forward, where by 2022, they'll be publishing the regional RT results, and we'll get a better idea about the regional radiation as well. So considering no time effect, now someone had asked about the 26 grain 5 versus the 27 grain 5. So major difference that was there. In fact, there was a communication that was given by Dr. John Yarnold, and he said that the difference in that 1 gray was in terms of the alpha beta, as well as in the 26 gray arm, they have taken into account the time effect. And that is why you've got the 1 gray significant difference that is being coming into picture. So when you take into account your alpha beta as 2, the dose that comes into in terms of your 2 gray equivalent is around 46.8 gray, and with an alpha beta of 1, it comes down to around 53.7 gray. So now we have the 10-year follow-up results of START in terms of your the various toxicities, and we've very well accepted that the hyperfractionation is here to stay when you compared it with the 50 gray. And now, since the 40 gray is being compared with even lower lower duration treatments, and the outcomes are almost in the tune of what was the hypothesis that was being projected. So here you can see the late normal tissue effects when you're comparing the start A and the start B, and it is favoring the hyperfractionation arm in terms of all the toxicity assessment that were done in terms of the breast shrinkage, the breast induration, the breast edema, the telangiectasias or the shoulder stiffness that is associated. And this is from the meta-analysis of any moderate or marked physician-assessed normal tissue effects, which was comparing again more than 2 gray per fraction versus your fraction size of 2 gray. So again, it is favoring the hypofractionated arm. Again, for the local regional relapse, when you're comparing 50 gray with the hypofractionation, again it is more or less favoring the hypofractionated arm. So one of the concerns when the start trials were there was the role of boost. Now you have the import, the UK import high and the UK import low. So they are looking into the sequential versus your synchronous boost, where you're giving around 3.2 gray per fraction and your 3.5 gray in the test 1 and the test 2 arms. And the results are quite encouraging when you're looking into the boost as well. So what are the limitations now that are actually associated with this study? So I've divided into two. Now the limitations are the authors of the study what they've talked about. They say that the heart dose and the cardiac events need a longer follow-up, which is quite acceptable. Even for your the various IMRT studies that we've done, we are looking into in tune of 15 to 20 years of follow-up where your cardiac events become significant. So definitely we need to wait. We need to have a good idea about what the cardiac events transcribe when we're giving as high as 5.2 and 5.4 gray per fraction. So for the subgroup analysis, like I discussed, they've not defined it, so it becomes a minor limitation. So the size of the trial was not suitable, deemed suitable for doing a subgroup analysis, and also your synchronous boost regimens. Now, since in the trial design itself, we'd mentioned that the boost was as per the institutional or the central protocol. So the synchronous boost regimens were quite different, and you did not actually have an idea what's actually going on. So we actually have to rely on the import high and the import low. Now coming to the Indian perspective, now the breast volumes actually vary, and this was one of the criticisms for your hyperfractionated studies. We still don't have a robust Indian data. Even in India, when you're looking into the 40 gray and 15 fractions, there have been surveys which have looked into the practice across the nation. In fact, we've still not accepted 40 gray and 15 fractions for both BCS as well as MRM. In fact, the situation is even worse for MRM. So, and the concerns for the radiation oncologists are quite valid. You really don't know what the Indian perspective could be. One of the important points that has been highlighted by the authors in this trial has been So what the authors have actually said that if you've got a left-sided breast, especially, the cardiac sparing was very significantly placed, and they looked into DIBH and the other modalities for the cardiac sparing. So in India, we still don't have many centers where cardiac sparing can be done. Sorry. So the availability of resources for cardiac sparing are very limited, and so that becomes a big limitation for incorporating this. And the other thing is, especially in the private settings, the financial constraints do come into picture. So to conclude, this was a non-inferiority trial, and it did prove its non-inferiority when you compare 26 and the 27 gray in terms of your conventional 40 gray and 15 fraction, in terms of your five-year ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence. The 26 gray dose level is similar to the 40 gray and 15 fractions in terms of the patient assessed normal tissue effects, the clinician assessed normal tissue effects, as well as the photographic change in the breast appearance. You got similar to normal tissue effects that were expected after 46 to 48 gray in your 2 gray fractions. So the consistency of the fast forward trial results in the adoption of the 26 gray and 5 daily fractions as new standard for women with operable breast cancer. requiring adjuvant radiation therapy to the partial or the whole breast. So should we wait before recommending as the new standard for all breast radiotherapy? The one point that goes in favor is that you've got a level 1 evidence that supports your 26 gray in 5 fraction as a treatment option in your breast or the chest wall alone, especially for your PT1 to T3 N0N1 breast cancer. However, there are quite a lot of factors that you have to take into account, especially the late side effects are not better compared to 40 gray. In the photographic sub-study, only 1,700 patients were involved. The 10-year follow-up is needed to see the trend of late effects. 3D planning and the volume-based DVH is required, and cardiac shielding for left-sided cases. A strict cardiac shielding needs to be taken into account. The data from the lymph nodal radiotherapy, which started in 2015, the results are awaited and it's expected in 2022. Maybe a lesser total dose of say 25 gray and 5 fraction needs prospective assessment. If 1 gray definitely makes a lot of difference. We've seen it between 26 and the 27 gray. And the widespread adoption of 40 gray and 15 fraction, it happened only after you had your multiple RCTs and around more than 7,000 patient data and 10-year follow-up. So after that only did we actually start adopting the hyperfractionation in terms of 40 and 15. So we do have to wait. We got a level 1 evidence, but the multiple randomized control trials and then probably a meta-analysis comparing all this, and probably we might be good to go for them. So thank you. We'll just. So yeah. Litin sir, yeah, I've mentioned about 1.6%, which was as per these. This trial is actually based on the fast results, and also depends upon the alpha by beta that was given by your start A and start B. So from the previous studies, the margin has been set at 1.6%. So would you like to add to that?
Hello.
Hello, sir.
I just want you to explain to the students in detail what does it mean actually, this non-inferiority margin, because that's an important component of this study. This lot of studies are done in such objectives, non-inferiority studies. Lot of non-inferiority studies are done, and this particular fact needs to be explained to the students clearly. What is actually non-inferiority? What is the non-inferiority study? And this margin also, that is also important. Some studies set a margin about 1.2 or 1.3. So what does it mean actually? When this particular test study will be considered non-inferior, and when this test study will be considered inferior, if the value that means if it comes more than 1.6, what uh, in actual figure, when you are analyzing the results, how do you come to that conclusion that it is within the margin of 1.6, and so it is non-inferior? So that's just needs to be explained to the students in a bit lucido, so that they can understand.
Okay. So basically, like sir pointed out, now non-inferiority, we've actually shifted now. We've got some standard of care, and we've got a protocol that goes around, and you've got a proper control, which is your conventional treatment modality. So the non-inferiority actually came into picture when you could not go ahead and differ from your main treatment much, or you were comparing some placebo. So here, especially in radiation therapy, we don't have the liberty of comparing it with the placebo. So when you're reducing your dose rate, or you're reducing your time, so that is where your non-inferiority trial actually becomes very important. So in a trial intending to show that there is a difference less than a specific amount between the control and your the experimental treatment arm that you have. So a non-inferiority design statistically tests the null hypothesis. Um, And that is where your non-inferiority trial actually comes into picture. So it's basically you're comparing a current therapy that is going on, like we've compared your 40 gray in 15 fraction, and you're using now, since we want to come down to 1 week instead of 3 weeks. So you're comparing it with the test arm, and you want to show that it is not inferior to what was the current therapy that is going on, and it is providing the same benefit to the patient. So um, vis-a-vis, you have your superiority trials, which are used to compare placebo or vehicle treatments, and that is where your superiority is being shown. So in this case, you're comparing your standard 3 week fraction treatment versus your 1 week fraction treatment. So in this study, the 1.6 margin, that the 1.6% that was defined, was as per your previous start A and the start B trials that were there. According to that, the difference was set, and they said that if the difference in your ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence, if it is less than 1.6%. Now this was as per the calculation that they did when the power was defined at 80%, and you had a one-sided p-value at set at 0.025. That is the p-value on the two-sided being considered as p less than 0.05. So if you compare that, and when you apply your statistics or your sample calculation is being done, the along with that the non-inferiority is set, and in this study it was set at 1.6%. So any ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence at 5 years for the two arms, that is the 26 gray and the 27 gray, when you compare it with your standard current therapy of 40 gray, if it falls less than 1.6%, that means it is not inferior to the current therapy that is going on. And if it falls within that range, you can accept it as a new standard of care and go ahead and treat. Am I correct, Dr. Litton sir?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So this is what a non-inferiority trial is, and this is how it is being designed. And so,
Uh, may I add some points to that, Dr. Vivek?
Mhm.
I mean, not just specific to the trial. And as far as I remember, I think the assumption made at 1.6 was because the 40 gray arm had in ipsilateral cent. So they set it as 1.6, slightly lower than 2, saying that if it is uh, if the ipsilateral breast recurrence is less than 1.6, then they would consider it to be a non-inferior. However, if it is more than 1.6, then the 40 gray arm would be would be better than these two experimental arms. And even when you look into the actual recurrence rates in these two arms, I think it was 2% versus 1.5%, right, Dr. Vivek? So, but yeah, and it was, and interestingly, it was better for the 26 gray arm. So 26 gray arm had a recurrence rate of 1.5% versus the 27 gray arm had a recurrence rate of 2%. It is understood that it's not a sample size of 4,000 is not enough to discuss the difference between these two, because the difference is very fine, and we would need a much larger uh, sample size to actually find out the difference between 26 and 27. But it actually came to be much lower than so the 26 gray arm was lower than 1.6. It was 1.5.
Yeah. So, Dr. Avi, I've just put up the randomization chart, that how they randomized it, and yeah. So one of the limitations is that only we need to actually wait for 10 years just to look into the long-term adverse events as well as your cardiac events. So definitely 5 years you cannot, but since you've got a level 1 evidence now, you can safely practice if you've got your cardiac sparing in place.
In fact, I feel that it's quite difficult. Like that, the OAs that they have set, those constraints that they have set, it is quite difficult to achieve that for an average Indian female. We tried for 2 patients to achieve the dosing, but we could not, and at last we abandoned. And in obviously we had the interest of fast forward in view of the present COVID situation. But in fact, the dose criteria is so tight; it was quite difficult to achieve the heart and the lung dose that they have given.
I think more very soon. So anything else that you'd like to add, sir? Listen, sir. So,
Viva, Dr. Viva, one question.
yes, sir.
When you are, this is regarding the PTV, when you are contouring the breast, or let us say example in breast preservation. So you are taking the CTV breast 5 millimeter below the skin,
Yes, sir.
but when you are giving 10 millimeter margin, it is covering the skin, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So yeah, do you expect skin effects, adverse skin effects in the 26 day or 27 day schedule?
Yes.
Did it really show? It did not show that much. So that I was a bit curious. So why it did not have much adverse effect on the skin, because you are covering the skin also.
Yes, sir. So that is what, if you look into the Indian perspective, even if you compare Start A and Start B, the PT volume and the coverage was almost the same. In fact, the contouring has been taken in from your the Start trials itself. So if you look into the results, definitely the European results are quite encouraging, and they don't have much of a difference in terms of your skin toxicity. Like in terms of your the skin ulceration or any form of telangiectasias or any even in terms of the edema. So this is quite encouraging if we just look into the European perspective. Definitely, the Indian population we need to actually consider and have our own proper RCT defined and validate these results. Probably we might get a little bit of toxicity, but we hope to actually aim it up.
Dr. Vivek, the last part wasn't audible.
I'm saying for the Indian perspective, if you see, we actually need to have our own RCT to validate the same. Because if you look into the skin appearance and your the breast distortion rates from this result that has come from the UK, the results are quite encouraging. Like Sir pointed out, the skin is being involved, and even though it is involved, your the toxicity assessed when the toxicity was actually assessed, there is not much of a difference that you're actually seeing in all the in both the 27 gray and 26 gray. It's a little higher for 27, but definitely 26 with 40, it's significantly less.
I know about one study being done, fast forward, but that's a pilot trial possibly being done in TMC Kolkata, but I'm not aware of the results so far. But that's a pilot trial.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So they are also doing a study. I think the same study they're with SIB. So same like import trials.
Import trial, yeah.
So like import trial, they're also trying an SIV for hemobed boost. The good thing about toxicities in as far as hypofractionation is concerned is that so even though like for obese patients there would be like theoretically there would be might be skin toxicity because of the higher dose per fractions, but when the skin toxicity starts, the radiation gets over in most of the cases in 40-15. That's one good thing. Might be also with this 25 gray fraction.
Right.
My concern would be when you're actually giving a reasonable dose, which is covering 50. Patients that we see with 40 grain 15 fractions by the end of the second treatment start complaining and difficulty in while sleeping.
Dr. Can you speak a bit closer to the mic?
Yeah. So the problem that what I've seen in the practice is that when you're coming towards your end or your mid of your second week, the patients start complaining of difficulty in swallowing. So the other thing that, especially in our population, that we need to actually look into when you're treating your SCF would be looking into the esophageal dose. With such a high dose per fraction, I think we might get a little bit more esophageal dose that is being received.
Yeah, esophageal. Yeah, that is also something. So, Dr. Vivek, when on that note, can I ask you something? What exactly do you practice? Do you practice in a neck neutral position or the head to turn towards the opposite side?
No, we
For
practice
SCF,
head neutral.
neck neutral.
Actually, there's not much of a, I don't know if there is any comparative study that has actually looked into your neutral versus your net turn to the opposite side, because the biggest it's a midline organ. How much actually difference does it actually make in the field itself? I'm not very much aware. I'm not going through the literature regarding it. You could just throw a little bit of light on this.
What I have seen, Dr. Vivek, is that whenever you turn the head to the opposite side, the field becomes a bit high, a bit bigger. If you are turning it to the opposite side, I feel that way. It's like while contouring, I feel more comfortable with a neck neutral position.
Okay.
So maybe, sir, would you like to add something?
Yeah, actually, the esophagitis, I have seen more. Esophagitis seems to be a bit more when we turn the head towards the opposite side.
Agreed, sir.
It is lesser in neutral position.
Yes, sir.
Fine, Dr. Reddy. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Lithan, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for
Thank you,
guiding
really.
us with this, sir.
That's a really good study being analyzed.
Yes, sir. Especially in this COVID times, it makes a lot of sense.
And after a bit of gap, this is again refreshing.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Viva. It was.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Divya. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Viva. It was a very good discussion. So I'm ending the session. Sir, I'm ending the session.